Today I am with Kamau Bell, who is my friend and the host of United States and United Shades of America. It's United States of America, but it's United Shades of America on CNN. And this coming Sunday's episode will be on the gig economy. Kamau, welcome. It's great to see you. And this is what, your sixth season on the show? Is that right? Or no, fifth. This is your fifth season on the show.
Middle of the fifth season, but we already know we'll be back for a season 6, which is the earliest we've ever found that out. I guess CNN's aware that I still need to travel around and figure out what's wrong with America. I guess I didn't figure it out in 5 seasons.
Well, if that's the criteria, you're going to be busy for a lot of years, many seasons. Yeah. Yes. So I want to talk about the gig economy, but also just, what's on your mind? What are you thinking about these days?
I mean, right now, primarily as a parent of 3 kids, 9, almost 6, and 2, school is the number one breaking news priority in this house. There is there's no conversation that can't be pushed out to talk about what are we doing about school.
And the local schools, I guess, are in your area are now what they're not going to be in person. They're going to be all remote. We haven't passed the threshold of whatever the COVID. I don't even pay attention to it because we had decided not to send our girls back already. Like it was already like, we're not going into that. So, but apparently the Alameda County has not passed the thresholds it needs to open the schools up, which a little bit is like, yay. I'm glad it's not left up to anybody else because, there are schools in session around the country. And so, but we'd already decided not to send our girls back. So my wife and me, but mostly her, has taken on the brunt of like, trying to set up our home so it feels more like school. Because last year, since it was initially going to be 2 weeks, it was really just throwing your kids a device, an iPad or a laptop, and saying, you're at school for a couple of hours. And our kids, like many kids around the country, got burned out on that. Well, they are burned out. I mean, I teach and my students are burned out. How do you feel about it, though, with regard to grade schools? Kids. I mean, I don't want them to go back to school because I obviously don't want kids to get COVID and take it back and affect their parents and grandparents and everybody else. But on the other part, on the other hand, you got a lot of parents that really need to send their kids to school in terms of, if the parents are going to work and, you've got poor parents and poor kids get school lunches. And and I don't think the administration is coming up with any money to make the schools safe. I mean, that's basically Betsy DeVos is out there, the education secretary saying, oh, we want to reopen schools, but she's not coming up with any money, right?
No. I think that's this whole thing, the whole pandemic, and even the protests around George Floyd's killing is about the failure of American capitalism. Like, I think it's just that we have seen that this thing called American capitalism does not, and you've talked about this for years, but it's like this is a clear indicator that American capitalism is an utter failure as an experiment. And if we want to get through this moment, then we have to come up with new ideas. So I understand that some parents feel like I have to work. School is daycare. I don't even care if my kids learn anything. I need them to be somewhere, so I have to think about them. And then for me, it comes back to like, I understand that we need to be putting pressure on our politicians to put money in people's pockets, so there's not that pressure to go to work. So, I mean, right now, one $1,200 check obviously did not save the day for most people.
No, in fact, and they ended the $600 a week. And that means, and going back to gig workers, 24% of the entire workforce are gig workers, and they now are getting nothing. I mean, they don't even get unemployment insurance, but they're getting absolutely zero in terms of now anything, because the $600 a week that they were getting when the pandemic started, the Republicans don't want to continue that, and that stopped essentially on Friday. Capitalism is not only failing, but our system of government that goes along with capitalism is also failing.
Which is sort of interesting in the episode because we recorded this months ago, and people can see that because I'm high-fiving strangers at one point, which I would not do at this point. But I asked there's a woman in the episode who's a gig worker, and I asked her about like, well, what do you think this is happening? And this was from months ago, as far as like why gig workers aren't being paid fair wages and don't have benefits and how it's affecting people. And she said, end stage capitalism. Like it was her answer, just like that was months ago. She's like, this whole system has failed. And again, we didn't even know to the extent to which it was going to fail because it was before COVID.
Do you think? But this raises a kind of basic question. Do you think that after the COVID, I mean, or post Trump, I mean, let's assume for the sake of the argument, please God, Trump is out of office next year. Do you think that there's going to be really a major movement to change capitalism in some fundamental way? I mean, is Joe Biden going to be leading a new progressive wave of revolution? I mean, that's hard to. I mean,
it is. I've said this before. I feel like, all due respect to Joe Biden, it's like when your car has a flat and you put on the donut. Like, I feel like we need Joe Biden to be the thing that gets us to the next place so that we can then fix the whole car. And I think he sort of knows that. I don't think I don't even know if he's going to run for two terms. And Angela Davis recently, I think, put it in the best way I could sort of think it through, is like, he's somebody who will be at least somebody we can negotiate with, put pressure on, and will feel the pressure of others around him to do the right thing. He's not going to be the most progressive guy, obviously, but at least he's somebody who can be negotiated with and will feel pressure of the masses. Trump obviously can't be negotiated with, feels no pressure, and is just looking for people to confirm what he already thinks, which is why he had those papers in his hands the other day. Just like, these papers say what I want them to say. But I think so. That's why I think it's not Joe Biden's not the savior. He's the thing that gets us, who hopefully gets us the time to sort of go, okay, everybody, take a breath. That was insane. Okay, now what do we want to do now that we can sort of like get this thing back on the right track?
Well, are people, maybe that's right. Maybe Trump is actually bringing us together. And I think this is what you're saying and Angela Davis was saying. Trump is, in a way, bringing not just progressives, but a lot of the rest of the country together to demand something from Joe Biden. And even though Joe Biden is a transitional candidate or a transitional president, I think even he talks about himself being a transitional president, he can be pushed. And if the rest of the country is more united than ever, we can push him to do something quite dramatic. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. And I think it's also, and I think it's also about the fact that I don't know this woman's name, but she just won a local race in Ferguson, I guess. Yes. And she beat a black activist, won a race in Ferguson, and she beat like a longtime incumbent Democrat. Now, normally you don't normally run against longtime incumbent Democrats because we want Democrats. But I think right now what's happening is like those people are being challenged. And so to me, it's not so much about Joe Biden. It's about people who normally wouldn't run for office because they were considered like, it's not for me, I don't have the right degrees or whatever, or I don't look the right way, I'm not a man, whatever those things are now through the AOC and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib are now going, oh, wait, if they can do it, I can do it. And to me, that's why I don't think the system changes like immediately, but we're looking like 10, 15 years down the line. If more and more of those people keep running, then the literal complexion of politics changes.
And it's a self-fulfilling positive prophecy, isn't it? Because if more and more good people get in there, like AOC, and people see that it is possible to be young and black or Latino, and it's possible to be a woman and be a politically powerful figure, you get more and more people who have the courage to say, well, how about me? I can do that too. And given demographics in the country, maybe that means something really positive. I mean, let's pray.
And I think the idea is that AOC and the squad aren't the squad. Like there are enough people there that they become the old guard at some point, and there's people who are like they need to be more progressive. I think that's the goal. Is like I think sort of like we want to categorize that as being the change. It's like no, that's the harbinger of change, hopefully. And as more and more people challenge longtime incumbents on both sides of the aisle, the better it is for our political landscape as the complexion changes. But I do think that we can't expect that like Joe Biden, like he's going to do that thing where here's my 100-day plan. That 100-day plan is not going to save us.
And no, I don't think so. I mean, I respect him and I have worked indirectly with him, but no, everybody, the platform, the so-called Democratic platform, that's not where the action is. The action is in terms of people who now say, I'm going to get involved. I'm going to push. I really, I've had enough of this. And hopefully there are enough people who say that.
And I think even the other lesson of Corey, I don't remember her first name, but the candidate in Ferguson, is that she ran twice. So the first time she lost, and that didn't she could have easily gone, well, I guess this is not for me, but then ran again. And so for me, it's like, I think that's the thing too, and it's hard because you got to fundraise and you got to be out there, and it's hard to take a loss. But like that sort of like, I'm going to keep trying, I think is necessary if you really want to change things.
Yeah, and the money, the thing that worries me, honestly, we're sounding kind of a Panglossian here. The thing that worries me is that you still have very powerful forces in the Democratic Party. You know, the big money and and Wall Street and big corporations, and they have got so used to calling the shots, not just in the Republican Party, but also in the Democratic Party, that they're kind of threatened right now by all of these new forces. And they certainly didn't want Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren. I mean, they ganged up. But they're very worried about AOC. They're very worried about some of these new voices in the Democratic Party. And there's going to be one of the big dramas in the Joe Biden administration, assuming there is a Joe Biden administration, is this showdown between the Democratic establishment and these new voices.
Yeah, and I think that our job is to make them more worried. Like, I think that, like, and to make sure that AOC is not the only person that they feel like is. I think right now there's a hyper focus on AOC, which I understand, but I think our job is, and I met a Pennsylvania State Rep Summer Lee when we did our white supremacy episode of United Shades, and she's somebody who was like, oh, hopefully this is just the beginning of your career, because she's somebody who is very dynamic. She's a Black woman who beat a longtime incumbent in Pennsylvania. She openly ran as a socialist, and so for me, it's like, if we can get those people to keep moving up the food chain of politics, then it's not going to be about, we're worried about AOC. It's like, oh, I need to get with the program or I'm out of here too.
Yeah. And politics is not just Washington politics, obviously. I mean, we want people to be involved at the state level. There's plenty of states that have gone rogue. We also want people to be involved at the local level. I mean, being politically involved means being an activist, and not being an activist just not just during election time, but between elections, and not just at the federal level, but for all levels. And,
yes. And
it takes time, it takes effort.
It takes time, it takes effort, and a lot of it's boring. I think that's the other thing about a lot of local politics. If anybody's ever gone to a city hall meeting, or now you can watch them on Zoom, it's not scintillating. It's not the West Wing, and you have to have a stomach for that to really make institutional changes. Have a stomach for that, the boredom of that level of politics. But again, voting locally is certainly as important as the election is, and it is as the national election. It's important to vote all the way down the ballot.
Well, I've just been struggling with this because I have been a big proponent of affordable housing in every community I've been involved in. And you got some developers down my street that are posing as affordable housing developers, but actually what they're doing is they're taking down old buildings and they're putting up these high rises or these townhouses and condos. They're selling them for $1.5 million each. And they're pretending it's low income. And their record is to go around the city. They've done this in Berkeley. I'm sure they're doing it in Oakland, every place else, going around taking down old places, old buildings. Those old buildings had renters who were low income, and replacing them with these townhouses selling for way over $1 million, and getting some subsidies or some credits from the city because that's supposed to be affordable. Affordable?
Yeah.
Affordable? I mean, when is $1.4 million affordable? I mean, we're in really bad shape.
Yeah, inflation hasn't hit that hard yet. That 1.4 million is affordable. I mean, I'm glad you brought that up because glad you brought that up because as the tweet went up for this podcast, a lot of people under the tweet that you put up had brought attention to a letter that you wrote. And you were accused of being NIMBY, not in my backyard, of not wanting affordable housing to be built in your neighborhood. So I think it's great that you can speak to that right now.
Well, listen. I'm an activist, and if these developers are going to try to pretend that they are putting up low-income housing, and they're putting up actually housing for 1.4 million people, 1.4 million dollar townhouses, and they're getting subsidies for doing it, and they're going around the town actually taking down buildings that renters need. I'm going to be speaking out about it. I don't care. I have a thick hide. People can call me a hypocrite. I don't care. I've been around this. I've been around doing this for a long time. But
so to be clear, Robert Reich is for affordable housing and in Berkeley.
I am for affordable housing in Berkeley, and I've spent a huge amount of time and effort trying to push for affordable housing, and I'm pushing the mayor for affordable housing. But I am not for developers who are pretending to be about affordable housing. And this is a problem. This is nationwide. I mean, you got an affordable housing crisis everywhere, and you got a lot of developers who are cashing in, pretending to do something that they're not doing, and frankly, it pisses me off.
How did it feel to have, because I just saw this letter that you had written, to have that letter put up on the internet and then torn apart? But I mean, I'm assuming when you wrote it, you didn't go, "This is going to be on Twitter." But there's this letter that is up there. I assume it's the real letter that now is like people are circulating to prove that you're a hypocrite. What is that? How do you recognize
Well,
that?
Again, I have my skin is so thick you can't even find my nerves anymore. I mean, I've been around politics so long, I don't care. But it is interesting to me that on the progressive side, now I don't know if you've felt this at all, but on the progressive side, there is such a lust to call people hypocrites if they have spent their lives fighting the good fight. I don't know if I don't know if the right wing has the same kind of lust to take down everybody. What do you think?
Not on the right. They have the opposite thing. They forgive everything. They
forget, they forgive.
Yeah.
You can do whatever you want.
You can be a good Christian who has paid for sex multiple times and still be and be the president and be considered. And evangelical Christians will love you because they say you're a good Christian, even though there's nothing in your life that looks to match up with being a good Christian. So yeah, I think the right forgives everything.
I think there is. But what do you think is the source of that? Why is it on the left there is this desire to take down, to pull people down, to accuse people of hypocrisy? What's going on? Is that?
I think
is it
not right after, but when Trump was elected, there was a lot of first of all, a lot of people were stunned. If you remember, a lot of people on the left were stunned, and there was a lot of energy to almost okay, well, we just need to march and we'll get him out of here, or we'll march and we'll get him in line, or and there hashtag resistance was everywhere. And then when that didn't have the effect of shaming him to leave office, I think a lot of people sort of started to turn on the left because there was nothing they could do to get him out. There was nothing, he wasn't experiencing shame, he wouldn't be negotiated with, and there was nothing they could do. And I think some of that, and some of the fear of what was happening in the country got sort of pointed at people they could take down. And I'm not saying this is I just think he was such a hypocrite, but there was nothing you could do about it, that when people saw hypocrisy in other people, they were like, I'm not going to stomach it from this person because I can't stomach it from him, but there's nothing I can do about that. But I can't stomach it from person who's supposed to be on my side. And so I think that I felt it with we did an episode of United Shades of America, and I talked to Richard Spencer, who at that point was the darling of the alt-right and becoming a sort of a media darling. And people were more mad about my interview with him than they were at what he was saying.
They were angry with you for even putting him on.
For putting him on. It was the whole time. Yeah. There was the time where we were talking about platforming and normalizing. And I was like, look, I get it. I'm the guy who talked to the Klan. So I understand that it's putting people on of different ideas isn't always popular. But I also felt like we got sort of hidden behind these buzzwords. Platforming to me is tonight on United Shades, I'm taking the week off and Richard Spencer's going to host the show. We'll see what he does. That's platforming. Normalizing is if I interview Richard Spencer and go, some of the ideas make sense. I'm going to have to think about it. None of that happened. And in the episode, he was 6 minutes of a 42-minute episode that was celebrating immigration and refugees. So for me, it was very clear that you feel like you can't control him, you can't get him out of here, but you can get me out of here, so you're going to come after me.
Yeah,
I certainly
you have a pretty thick skin. I mean, that doesn't bother you, does it?
I mean, it bothers me, but I also know that there's no point in letting it show. Like, there's no point in, like, that's what pints of ice cream were invented for, Robert.
Yeah.
There's no point in, because I think that, like, I have to, I understood, like, this is just the price, technically I'm in show business. I'm like, this is just the price of doing business. Like, it's just like, it can't always be your day. And I think that and I think also I've been pretty clear in my career that if I am called out for something that I did that was wrong, then I'll go, once I understand it, I'll be like, yeah, you're right. Even if it hurts to say it, I will go, yeah, you've made a point. I shouldn't have done that joke. I did say that. I did say that incorrectly. I will be corrected. But I think sometimes people are just looking to correct you. And also looking for like cracks in your armor so they can go like, oh, wait a minute, Robert Reich, we think he's this guy. He's not this guy. But then I will say, it then becomes our responsibility as people of privilege to sort of know what's a good look and what's a bad look. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, a couple of years ago, the right wing, they don't have any compunctions about distorting what somebody actually says. There was a few years ago, I think it was 2008, so it was more than a few years ago, when, the government was coming up with a lot of money for a lot of contractors to try to counter what was then the Great Recession of 2008. And I testified before Congress, and some Republican members of Congress said to me, well, what do we have to do with regard to who we contract with? Who gets all this money? I said, make very sure that the money doesn't go just to white men. I mean, you got to make sure that the contractors are people of color and also women. And then Fox News started to distort what I said. And Fox News, and this is Bill O'Reilly and Hannity, they said that I said, you Congress, you should not give any money to white men. And, I mean, what do you do? I mean, I got so much hate mail, I'll tell you. And I called up Hannity, not Hannity. I called up Bill O'Reilly. And I said, and I said, will you please correct the record? I mean, just look at what I said. You have the congressional record. I can't do that. Why are you? And he wouldn't do it.
Of course not, because because it's not a news channel; it's an entertainment channel. That's like calling up Seinfeld and saying, "Can you correct the record on your TV show?" Like, it's not like it's not. And I think that I've gotten, Tucker Carlson has used me multiple times on his show on what I would say is on a slow news day. And the first couple times it happened, I got all this hate, and it really and also made me feel unsafe because a lot of people were attacking me, were getting really personal about it, and really involving my family, and it sucked. It totally sucked. But I also understood again, did you make the choices you made, Kamau? I did. Do you stand by the things you said, even though they're being distorted? Like, I was called a hate monger by Tucker Carlson. And I knew he was full. I knew he was.
So he just called you a hate monger? I mean, that's all he did?
I went to it was during when the alt-right was showing up in Berkeley every week, right around the Trump's election, to I think they thought they could take Berkeley. They thought if we take Berkeley, then next we'll take, who knows. And eventually enough people from in and around Berkeley and enough people from surrounding cities were like, you're not going to take Berkeley. And so, the rallies ended up being more people who showed up against the rally than for the rally. And, it got a little frothy, and I was on the back of a truck. And so he's with some people who, I don't know if they identified as Antifa, but Tucker Carlson said, I was on the truck with Antifa. I'm a member of Antifa. Antifa peddles hate. So W. Kamau Bell peddles hate. You know that kind of math.
Oh, yeah. Meanwhile, the associate. And Tucker Carlson. Yeah. See, I think, people are talking about him on the right. They're talking about him as a candidate for the Republican presidential election of 2024. And something that worries me, because he is smarter than Trump. He's worse than Trump in many ways. He's smarter than Trump. He's more dangerous than Trump.
And I think, first of all, I think anything can happen. At first, my first response was that's never going to happen. I was like, wait, Kamau, we live in a world where Trump is president. Okay, he may talk himself into thinking that could happen. And it becomes our job on the left to not be so mealy-mouthed about who we put in positions to run against someone like Tucker Carlson. And it's the thing you said with Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. It becomes our job to not look for the safe choice in that race. If Tucker Carlson is their guy, then we need to pick somebody who is irresistible on our side and not someone who we think is going to pull from Tucker Carlson voters. I think that we have to.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And kind of raises the question. I mean, we started out talking about gig workers, and you got millions of them who are now out of luck, out of work, out of money, who basically the federal government has failed them. Some of them voted for Donald Trump in 2016, and some of them are Republicans. But how do you convince them? And let's go back to the gig workers. How do you convince them that they are getting shafted by the Republicans? They're getting shafted by Trump, by McConnell. Are they going to pay attention to us? Are they going to pay attention to any Democratic candidate? Are they going to pay attention when one of us goes and says, you are being shafted? Or are they going to pay attention to Fox News?
I mean, I think that for me, I think it's more interesting to motivate people to vote who don't normally vote, especially in areas where we need those votes, like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and these swing states. Yeah. I think some people, I have to feel like if you can look at your life, I think it goes back to that old standard: is your life better now than it was 4 years ago? Yeah. Unless you're a billionaire, I don't know who can say their life is better now than it was 4 years ago. I mean, unless you're one of the elite.
Billionaires are doing fabulous in this pandemic.
Yeah, but to me, the idea that they're making money on the pandemic is maddening. So
it's extraordinary.
So I can't imagine in this moment that your life is better 4 years ago, even if you are a person who is one of the 1%, because the people around you are failing so poorly. That you can't send your kids to school. I think it's about focusing on saying that to those people, but then focusing on people who don't normally vote and getting out the vote, whatever that looks like.
And I think that a lot of it, people like you have a lot of influence, and the limited influence I have. I think and everybody else we know, what we've got to do is make sure that everybody knows not only that they've got to register and they've got to vote. Obviously, they've got to get other people to vote. They've got to, this voting by mail. What Trump is trying to do, saying that it's okay to vote. It's not okay to vote by mail, but it's okay to what? I mean, he's trying to confuse people, and voting by mail is necessary. Yes. And people have got to know that they've got. Most states do permit voting by mail. We've got to get the word out that right now people have got to get absentee ballots. And then
I think after this moment, and then whatever happens, we have to start working on systemic changes for all of this stuff, like national voter registration, national voting by mail, like real systemic changes that the next time a Trump comes along, whether it's Tucker Carlson, that the system is strong enough to withstand the challenge. Because right now the system
and the Voting Rights Act. I mean, the whole Voting Rights Act was gutted by the Supreme Court. But what the Supreme Court did in 2013 was say, Congress, you can, and we invite you to repair the things that we found that were unconstitutional. Congress didn't do it. The minute Democrats have power, one of the first things they've got to do is repair that Voting Rights Act, make it the law of the land again. I mean,
and one of the groups that I work with is called Pack the Courts. The idea of expanding the Supreme Court to have more seats on the Supreme Court, so that the court is not so biased, so Republican, so conservative. And so that's another thing. I think we have to really look at things that sound sort of fantastical, but really look at huge systemic changes so that the system can withstand these kind of challenges from people like Trump.
Well, I'm going to be fighting like mad. I'm sure you are, Kamau, and let's continue this conversation. I love talking to you. You're a terrific ally and friend, and you're on the front line, and you're doing a great deal of great important work. I love your show on CNN. So thanks for joining me today. Good luck to you. Hang in there, and we'll survive. We'll make the change. We'll make the change.
Keep hope alive. We'll make the change.
Keep hope alive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Take care.
Thank you.